My name's Nick Thornton, I'm Head of Fine Art and I mainly look after the post-1900 collection, focusing on modern and contemporary art. John Selway's a really important artist who's well represented in the collection, a really important artist for Wales. He studied at Newport College of Art in the 1950s, then he did national service, and then he went to the Royal College of Art in 1959. Whilst studying at the Royal College, he was in the kind of epicentre of the pop art world, so fellow students were David Hockney, Peter Phillips, Derek Bourchier, Pauline Boty. So a really kind of interesting artist that was exposed to the latest things happening in London, but taking some of those ideas back to Wales and exploring that in a Welsh context. Many artists were looking to what was happening in America. So many artists in the late 1950s started to increase the scale of their canvases, started to paint in a very gestural kind of abstract way, so paint flying around on the surface of the canvas. Cold Mill was painted in 1960, and it was at a time when many artists in Britain were looking to the latest developments from the New York School, abstract expressionism, Jackson Pollock, those sort of artists. And with this work, you can see John Selway knowing what was happening in New York and responding to that. So the canvas gets slightly bigger, you get a sense of the paint being applied very quickly in gestural, kind of almost like a signature of the artist, the signature of an action across the surface of the canvas. So John Selway at this time was very much looking to what was happening in New York. And the really fascinating thing about this painting is that it's a subject matter that he's located in South Wales. He's called it Cold Mill. We know that it was painted as a result of his experience of working in the steelworks. So he's combining a subject matter that he knew and was very familiar with an international abstract style. So you get these two things happening in the work, and for me, it's an even more interesting work in that way. On file, we often keep kind of correspondence between artists that really kind of give us more information on the work. And there's some fascinating correspondence between the museum and John Selway dating from 1960, when he knew the painting was coming into the collection. And the keeper of art at that time, was asking, how would you like it to be framed? And there's a wonderful letter where he says, I'd like a narrow gilt frame, not too wide. And he does this kind of little sketch drawing on the letter explaining how it should be framed. So, and the important thing about that work is that it was exhibited in the museum in 1960 as well. So it's an example of the museum exhibiting an artist's work and then acquiring it for the national collection. So it's an important example of how the museum, you know, going right back to the 1950s and the 60s, was kind of supporting artistic practice in Wales. Dennis Short was born in Devon in 1927, and then he lived in London. But during the 1950s, he travelled widely through South Wales, in particular the Rhondda Valley, and produced an extraordinary series of realist paintings based on the normal lives of people within that community. And in 1958, he showed at the National Eisteddfod and won the gold medal for painting for a work based on a terrace at Maesteg. So he had produced quite a large body of work, all focused on the South Wales valleys and representing the buildings and the communities in that particular place. With Chapel and Tip that you can see behind me, you get again a view of the Rhondda Valley. You get a sense of the chapel and a street leading up to the chapel, and then behind the chapel building there's this kind of looming coal tip. And then down the street in front of the chapel facade, there's a group of children playing, and you get this distinctive balloon, pink balloon, floating above them. And the colour of that kind of really picks out the composition, because the rest of the painting is largely monochrome, painted in black and white. For me, the scale of the picture is really important. This is an artist that was travelling from London, was deliberately coming to South Wales to look at the communities and the lived experience of people within those communities. And really he's creating a large, ambitious, monumental painting that gives a sense of kind of importance to the scene that he's representing. For me, both the Selway and the Dennis Short are really interesting to compare. They're both painted in 1960, but with Dennis Short, he's painting in a realist style, and many people would associate realism with representing real life communities. So many artists who had a social commitment would paint in a realist style. With John Selway, he was an artist that came from the South Wales valleys, that lived and grew up within the community, and he was turning to an international style abstraction to paint a particular place, a location that he had a great familiarity with. So for me, it's really interesting to compare the two paintings. An artist that grew up within a community painting in a certain style, and an outsider really who's travelling through the community painting in a different style, a more, in some ways, more accessible, socially engaged style. And for me, that's a kind of fascinating story. There's a kind of tension and a dialogue between the two paintings. And one I wouldn't say is any more important than the other, but it's a different way of producing or representing a different location, but in a completely different artistic style.